My name is. I'm going to start over again because I'm not sure if I've that registered. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacques Lamar, and it's my pleasure to welcome you as your host for this evening's discussion on behalf of the Mark Twain House and Museum here in Hartford, Connecticut. Tonight, we are welcoming back two guests that we've had before, and at one point they were together. We're welcoming Sloane Crosley and Ophira Eisenberg for a discussion of Sloane Crosley's new novel, Cult Classic. I'm going to be introducing our guests a little more formally in just a moment, but first I want to thank our sponsors for tonight's event. The Mark Twain House and Museum's virtual programs are produced in part with support honoring Frank Lord, a beloved trustee of the museum who passed away a few years ago, and we're happy to honor his memory with these programs, which he would have loved very much. And we're also incredibly grateful to the Wish You Well Foundation and Connecticut Public WNPR for supporting tonight's program. One of the benefits of this being a virtual program is that you as the audience can have your own conversation in the chat. The chat feature is live at the bottom of your screen alongside our guest discussion, and we do encourage you to do so. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you've read the book. We will also be posting the link to purchase a signed copy of Cult Classic from the Mark Twain store. Getting your copy through our store not only gets you a signed copy of the book, but also benefits the Mark Twain House and Museum. So that is a win-win. If you have a specific question for Sloane and Ophira, you can go ahead and post that directly into the Q&A feature, which you also see at the bottom of the screen. And I will pop back on before the end of the program to share your questions with Sloane and Ophira. So please, if you have a question, don't put it in the chat. Please put it in the Q&A. There's also at the bottom of the screen one more thing that you'll want to take note of, and that is there is a live transcript feature if you'd prefer to see live auto captioning of this event. Now, all that aside, let me introduce our guests. Our moderator is Ophira Eisenberg, who hosts NPR's nationally syndicated comedy trivia show Ask Me Another, where she interviews, jokes, and plays silly games with boatloads of celebrities. She can be seen headlining on stand-up comedy stages across the US, Canada, and Europe. Ophira filmed her comedy special Inside Joke when she was 8.5 months pregnant, and the show's material revolves around how she told everyone that she was never going to have kids, and then unexpectedly found herself expecting at, quote, an advanced maternal age. Inside Joke can be found on Amazon and iTunes, along with her two other comedy albums, Bangs and As Is. She has appeared on Comedy Central, This Week at the Comedy Cellar, Kevin Hart's LOL Network, HBO's Girls, Gotham Live, The Late Late Show, The Today Show, and VH1. And her first book, Screw Everyone, Sleeping My Way to Monogamy, is a comedic memoir about her experiments in the field as a single woman. Originally from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Ophira graduated with a cultural anthropology and theater degree from McGill University. She now lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and son, where she can be seen regularly drinking a ton of coffee. And our author tonight is Sloane Crosley. She's the author of the New York Times best-selling essay collections, I Was Told There'd Be Cake, a 2009 finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor, and How Did You Get This Number, as well as Look Alive Out There, a 2019 finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor, and the best-selling novel, The Clasp. She served as the editor of the Best American Travel Writing Series and is featured in the Library of America's 50 Funniest American Writers, the Best American Non-Required Reading, Philip Lopate's The Contemporary American Essay, and others. She was the inaugural columnist for the New York Times op-ed Townies series, a contributing editor at Interview magazine, and a columnist for the Village Voice, Vanity Fair, the Independent Black Book, Departures, and the New York Observer. She's a contributing editor at Vanity Fair. Her new novel, Cult Classic, is being discussed tonight, and her next nonfiction book, Grief is for People, will be published in 2023. She lives in New York City. So if we can welcome our guests to the stage. Sloane, where are you?
Hi.
There you are. All right, so I'm going to disappear, and then Ophira will call me back for Q&A. please sit back and enjoy to those watching, and don't forget to drop those questions in at the end of the program.
Great.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Sloane.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Welcome, everybody.
I
And
mean,
nice to see you.
Thank you for doing this. It's good to see you again, sort of, your top half.
Yeah, and so here we are in the virtual stage.
Yeah, I brought something from real life, though. Ready?
Well, yes.
It's happening. It's about to happen.
Okay, I love it. I'm in. What?
Oh, is it a Mark Twain bobblehead? It's in case you're confused about what it is.
You're like, which white man is that?
I don't know.
Oh, wait.
They don't make an Updike bobblehead. It's like a big apple. But yeah, this is from last time. And he sits, I realized I didn't drag this out for this event. He sits on my desk and sort of quietly judges me at all times. The whole
You got that the last time we were there in person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
excellent.
For you.
That's on your desk?
Yeah, all the time, because there's a judgment. You know, I feel like you never. Yeah, that's on my desk. Yeah.
So, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but since we're celebrating your new book, why, there it is, everybody. A novel, your second novel, cult classic. Did you want to start? I know that there are people that are that haven't read the book yet. Did you want to do a short reading to start things off virtually, or would you rather not?
Maybe. What if I did a summary?
Yeah, great.
That might help.
Sure.
Normally I would do a reading, but I do think that people tune in for a conversation, so you can hear. Imagine these dulcet tones, but articulate. Just put yourself there. But I think there's a lot of like aspects of this novel that has a couple of moving parts. So I feel like just anything I read, it works in person, but anyway, whatever. Yeah. So I'll just tell you. So basically, it tells the story of a woman named Lola, who's in her late 30s. She's actually 37 in the galley and 38 in the finished book for some weird fact-checking reason. So I like to say that she grew up, like she would have had a birthday between the galley and the hardcover. So it sort of makes sense. But so she is engaged to be married, and she used to work for this is just like all the stuff you need to know. This all takes place in downtown New York in Chinatown, and she used to work for a magazine called Modern Psychology, which I always say is like the least creative part of the book, because it's very apparently psychology today. But it was folded, and she is at a work reunion dinner, steps out and runs into an ex-boyfriend, which is fine. You know, they have this sort of link lettery kind of evening. But then it keeps happening. And then it turns out, without ruining it too much, a series of events happens. One of her other coworkers that she used to work with at this magazine that folded is like, you need to come with me since all this weird stuff is happening. And she takes her to an abandoned synagogue on the Lower East Side, where their former boss, sort of turned psych guru, cult of personality, just really annoying, terrible man, has started a mind control cult out of an abandoned synagogue, as I said, in an effort to get her over her attachment to the past and have her move on with her relationships. That sounds very insane, but it's funny. I think
very funny.
I hope.
Yeah. So I feel like, and I know that you've been talking about this book for a little while. And I don't know what you were thinking about when you just first started writing it, of where it would fit in the genre of books, because of course you're writing a novel, so that's one thing. Right. And then the next thing, you have a female lead character who is complicated and interesting. And I want to talk to you about the fact that you put her at a very specific age, but then she's talking about her exes. So this is not a chick lit book. It has a thriller aspect, but it is someone who is looking at their past, which is informing their character. As a writer doing a novel, this is your second novel. Are you thinking thinking about it as you're writing it, as to where is this going to go on the shelf?
Hopefully not color coded, and not under a candle.
Not under a candle is a good one.
Not under a candle. I'm such a big snob when it comes to book organization.
Yeah.
But it's funny, you don't think of it that way as it's happening, or at least I didn't. I mean, the reason why I sort of like shook my head when you said chick lit is not some sort of not because of some sort of ghettoization or bastardization or like wanting to avoid entertaining women, but because I do think that people who gravitate only towards beach reads are going to be like a little weirded out because it's really literary fiction or speculative fiction that's funny. What's funny is you get into the logic of the world, or at least I did, which is the only way I can hope that the reader will as well, which is a lot of it is a send up of technology, it's a send up of wellness culture, and I just don't think it's that weird. I think there might be something wrong with me. You mentioned I've been doing a lot of events. I think so. The reason why is because everybody is like, oh, it's speculative fiction. Some people throw around magic realism, although that's not really the right term because it has its own sort of political roots. I think this is very realistic. I think that a lot of how, what I skipped in the sort of my preamble was that what happens is she goes in the sort of Groundhog Day style, just to use a cinematic reference, just sort of night after night after night, this one area in Chinatown and keeps running into these ex-boyfriends. And so there's a bit of a mystery to how they're getting there, but a lot of it has to do with technology manipulation, social media manipulation. And, in the book, these packages that, Clive, the old boss, is running cost like $250,000. I think if I had $50 in your Instagram password,
yeah,
I could put you somewhere I wanted, so the idea that it's so wacky and crazy, I like, because I want it to be unusual. I want it to be a unique sort of approach to the dating story. But in the process of writing it, I'm like, well, this makes sense. Like, total sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many things I like about it because it is many things. And therefore, I think very hard to define in it, other than funny and entertaining.
Funny is hopefully always the through line, nonfiction and fiction alike, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. How long has this story, or maybe some of these characters, been rolling around in your brain?
Percolating.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say. It's so funny. I feel like that question should be the easiest, and I don't want to sound. I heard an interview once with Bret Easton Ellis where he said he didn't remember writing American Psycho, and I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like I don't need to be like, I don't know. It just came to me in a dream. But I feel like some of the stories, because they involve dating,
mm-hmm.
And then the earliest person who sort of gets resurrected is someone she knew when she was 13 or 14. I mean, so then, so in a way, it all like comes together. But I would say that the real impetus was almost in the negative, which is, and I'm sure you know what this is like too, where people assume you're a funny woman and you're writing about romance or you're writing about dating. It's what I call girl falls from bar humor. Like, I'm so crazy. I got up during karaoke night and fell into a man's arms and like
right.
somehow got home without my purse. And like, God bless them. God bless them if they're out there. But I just feel like because that sort of gets foisted on me as a woman who primarily writes narrative nonfiction, and even with the novel, I've just been avoiding writing about romance and writing about dating. And this thing that takes up, first of all, half my freaking phone with friends, not just me, just screenshots of things and just, all this, this sort of stuff of life that feels unserious because of how it often gets portrayed. And so I just really wanted to give this the literary treatment, this topic, something a little weird, something approach it from a sort of philosophical standpoint or an ethical standpoint, or a magical, or wacky standpoint. But I think so I started writing it, the short answer to your question is like 2017. I started writing it like 2017. But I know that it happened because I was sick of not writing about this kind of thing.
Did you find like, even though with all of the personal narrative essays that you have written, hundreds, I don't know, hundreds, is that
Definitely
possible?
over 100. I feel like, I think I once counted to make myself feel more accomplished. Like, just I feel like, oh, look at my lens, like.
Yeah. And there is a portion of them that were about romance and
Yeah,
dating and
sure.
love,
Like
but there
five.
is a huge portion that are not about that at all
Mhm.
kinds of different things. But do you feel like often as a female writer that was writing first person, people just said that you were writing about relationships?
Oh,
Like just could,
absolutely.
oh yeah?
Yeah, because the thing is, so I was told There Be Cake, my first book came out
Yeah.
in 2008. And it's not like I'm not standing on the shoulders of a lot of different people, but really the last sort of major collection by a female essayist, Nora Ephron, I Feel Bad About My Neck, was I think 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back to like Irma Bombach, or what I mean? It really is like, it's all the boys. It's like the David
Yep.
Rakoff, dearest person in the world, miss him very much. David Sedaris, Bill Bryson, Chuck Klosterman. My only neighbor that was like not, I mean, Nora Ephron is like Nancy Meyers territory, right? So I'm not going to be confused with that either from a skill set perspective or from a generational perspective. But the only like neighboring person I had at all like that, and it's not to say there was no one else, like Megan Dawn was writing, all these people, but the way it was sort of digested was Sex in the City. So you
Yes.
have Candace Bushnell and you're in the wake of that. So people, yeah, it got applied all the time. And I think part of what I was like, this is like a therapy session, but part of it is like once you realize that that people are going to say this whether you write about it or not, you might as well do whatever the hell you want. I mean, that's also the beauty of aging, not just this topic, not just novels, for anyone who is listening, the freedom of getting older and being like, I cannot control other people's impressions of me. I will now do what I want.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally, yes. And also, I'm saying this stuff about myself only. I'm not going to make this all
No,
about my
there's so
garbage
many
truck.
things actually in your bio I wanted to talk to you about. We can talk about it later.
But when I decided to write a book about dating, I was actually very reticent about writing it because I was like, we don't need another one of these.
And yours is nonfiction, so that's
And
even
mine is nonfiction.
scarier.
And we were talking about, I didn't know how to end it, and they were like, but you ended up by being married, and I was like, I do not want to end it up being married. And it ends up that ends up, just so you know, spoiler, it ends up married. And I just kept saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want it to fall in this genre of this kind of writing. And the publisher and the editor and the agent, everyone said, do it your own way, and it's worth something.
Yeah. Well, do it your own way, because the other thing is, but well, that's also a logistical issue. Like it ends with you being married, presumably, and you'll have to forgive me because I have not read it, but it presumably ends with you being married because you're not, if it was a book about, you're just not dating anymore. So it's not the proactivity of marriage, it's that you're out of material for dating. Like you're like, we've come to the end of the road. It's less like,
No.
I assume
That's right. Like, what more to write?
Like from what I know of you and like your sort of style and your way of being and like, your work, I just have a difficult time imagining it says like, and then I got married and now I have no problems because I found the man of my dreams. The end.
Ding. So I'm just wondering, when you were thinking about writing this, were you, was there a moment where you're like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care that this book is, obviously there's so many different elements, and it's not just about a woman reviewing her life through her exes to inform her identity. There is an aspect of that.
Yes.
But it's not of the whole. But I don't, when you're giving someone a 2-line bio or a 2-line summary of how it's going to, how you're going to market it or what it's about.
Right. Well, I think not to be, if I can tell you this just as a proxy for my publishing house, they like the love letter to New York aspect of it, which is sort of interesting to me because I handed this book in. They're like, oh, it's so much New York City nostalgia, sort of like thriving yet not cliche downtown portrayal. And it just makes me laugh because so much of it has been about like, oh, it's like this like pre-COVID, or it's like this nostalgia for the city before COVID, but I handed it in first draft March 2020. So I didn't know. Like there's no part of me that I know,
Oh my
right?
God.
We're like, well, we're just gonna do this. Let's let it ride. Literally, I remember having conversations about moving the pub date where like because of like printing problems and or potential zombies, like, you know, nobody knew what was gonna happen. But there's a way that like I did it. I think a lot of what the book has going for it, and hopefully what a lot of my nonfiction comedic writing has going for it, is that I'm not aiming straight for the joke. So it's not in this
Yeah.
version of it and the fiction version, it's not really a story about dating. It seems like it is. There's a lot of it, but the container sort of through which the men pass, or this sort of portal, is about the changing nature of friendships and relationships. The reason why, you know, you brought it before, I brought it up, but you, I think, were excited by it, that she's 37.
Yeah.
So that you can have like her relationship with Clive, who's running this like sort of exclusive society slash cult, has had a lot of iterations and incarnations. And it's not just a will they won't they story, because they won't. I'll spoil that part for you. It's more that like they've had past sexual tension. He's been a mentor. He's been a friend. He's been like her brother. She wants to kill him. Like, you know, and that seems like a kind of relationship that, you know, after a while you look around, you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna know you forever. All right, here we go. You know, and I feel like that's a thought that starts happening around 35, 36, 37, you know?
Well, even the
So it's about that. Yeah.
yeah, and even the relationships of all the characters in the book, the close characters, Clive and her best friend, you know, these are people that she knows from an adult part
Work.
of her life.
Yes, not college, not work. I mean, yes, work. That's the other thing. It's a lot about media and, you know, the sort of downfall of media and the rise of wellness culture and this obsession with technology in our phones, which are all topics that, you know, you can read about in the Atlantic. You don't have to turn to fiction for them. But I feel like they were extremely helpful to give the novel a backbone so that it wasn't just me taking a bunch of pot shots at, you know, archetypes of men. Having said that, what fun the pot shots were.
Okay, well, to that extent, as someone who, you know, you've written a lot of books, second novel, obviously, we were just talking about that you've written a great deal of first person narrative, personal stories. So when you're writing a novel and, you know, here we are, it is very realistic. I have to say some of it reads like I'm reading dialogue out of a script because it's so back and forth and bantery, and it really just like it just gives so much breath to these characters. Do you find the freedom of writing fiction? Is it something that is just like, yes, I can do anything? Or is it sometimes just too much? Because you're like, where do I go? Where do I go?
Yes, next question. Yeah, both. I think that, you know, the way I always describe it in terms of going back and forth between genres is like when I clean my house and I'm sick of cleaning the bathroom, I clean the kitchen. Or you go back and forth and all of a sudden, again, almost in the negative, both, you know, piles rise and everything gets neat. So you get sick of nonfiction where you're like, I just want to make stuff up. You know, I just want to fabricate things, and I'm sick of, especially when you write narrative nonfiction, you're like, I just can't talk about myself anymore. You know, even if that is but the vehicle to observe the world. Again, with narrative nonfiction, I don't really consider it necessarily talking about myself, but sort of a conduit, if you will, for being really opinionated. And then I feel like then you get your wish. Wonderful. You can make everything up. Congratulations. Every thought you have ever had is your fault. Every thought, every detail, every character name. New York Magazine just did I recorded my own audiobook, which was exciting to do.
Yeah, how'd you like it?
And, you know, I'd done it for nonfiction because they want you, I mean, it's your voice, it's so close. I didn't do it for the class because there's a bit of French in the class, which hopefully won't turn people off from my first novel, but no, thank you. I'm not reading that. No one needs to hear me speak French. But for this, because it's first person, the other one was third person, and different, character. For this, it's consistent first person. It made more sense for me to read it. I love doing it.
Oh, good.
I have to say, the greatest compliment maybe of my life is there was a typo in the book, and there's a sort of remote producer, and you've got the headphones on, you're in a little glass cage, and I cursed. I was like, I was like, and he's like, what? And I'm like, nothing. There's a typo. And he's like, well, how do you know? I'm like, because I wrote it. And this is so obnoxious for me to tell the story, but this man goes, oh, I thought you were an actress. And I could have like reached through the microphone and kissed him, I was like, thank you. But I brought it up though, because, the New York Magazine, the critique of the audiobook, they liked it, but the one critique was that some of the names were very silly. But the names of different characters.
Oh.
And I laughed because I thought like,
What?
That's a good example of sort of the responsibility. You're like, I don't know, maybe that's a doofy thing I did, but I don't know. It's just a very weird, that's a bad example.
Although you got to say, if they're like the names of the characters were like a little, you're just like, okay, well, if that's all you have, fantastic.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, no. I'm not upset by this. I'm more just kind
very,
of
like what?
Like it's
Okay.
interesting because it's all a decision. You change the name of one or two people for an essay, right? But you are crafting an entire world for fiction. And so if someone said that the name of a person I had written about in nonfiction was sort of silly, it wouldn't matter, because I think more like, oh, well, fine. But I used it to cover up for legal purposes.
Yes.
That person really is. And for fiction, you're like, oh, this is funny. It's all part of my weird brain.
You're like, should I have called her Mia? Should I have called him Brian?
Should I call it, no, it's Bob? All Bob? Maybe I call them all Bob. And now good luck reading it, I mean, but I'm sure you have the same thing where there's certain things you do that feel in your wheelhouse, or that you can hide behind the structure of them. You're like, okay, I was given an assignment, so I have to do something within these parameters. And then there are certain things that feel like someone invited you to a talent show and said, do anything.
Right.
And you're like, it's paralyzing.
Oh, it's paralyzing.
It's paralyzing, but once you get going, it's freeing.
Yes. Freedom can be paralyzing, which is
Yet
I invite that. So, so when you're writing, again, I'm curious of your process. I will steer away from lots of process information here, because I know that's like a whole thing that people are like, process is hard to talk about. But did you write the entire structure? Or are you more like, as I write it?
No, I'm happy for this question, because I actually have an answer this time around. I think what I learned from the essays end all the time, very frequently. That's why you can have a book of like 16 of them or 9, and I feel like with this, sort of anything long format, you have to give yourself a little bit of structure, but I also find structure to be a downer if things are too well plotted. And luckily I haven't written something that involves like a genealogical chart in the front of the book where you really need to, you're like, hi, my name
I
is
would
Louise
compare this to Game
Erdrich.
of Thrones.
Yeah, Game of Thrones, Louise Erdrich. My brilliant friend. I would compare it to Game of Thrones too. Again, everyone, don't be disappointed. Please buy the book. But there's minimal dragons.
If Game of Thrones was set in New York City.
Imagine Game of Thrones, but there's a 5th lady and it's New York City. But no, it's like you do it. So I don't want to like, I don't want to have a chokehold on it. So I basically, after I was like 10 to 15 pages in, then had the structure, but I didn't have the ending.
Mm-hmm.
You leave a little bit of a sort of internal questioning or malleability, or to put it in a cute way, a which way bookery, of it, for yourself, just because you have to live with these characters for so long. Like I said, I started it in like 2017. That's a really long time to live with a story and to return to it day after day. You really have to be invested in it and curious about it. And I find that like no structure is bad news bears, because no structure can lead to pages of your beautiful, stunning description of a shower curtain, and I'm like, okay, let's move it.
Where are we?
Yeah, where are we?
Going?
But too much, and it's not good. So I started about 20 pages in, and then I had most of it except for the ending. And then when I realized what the ending was, it was like the Bellagio fountains, So excited.
So, so that's your treatment of the story. Now, your characters, just to be clear,
Yes.
I know this, none of them are you. I don't know
no.
I don't know if any of the people,
all of them are me and none of them are me.
none of them are you and all of them are you. Of course, it's your fingerprint on everything. And I just wonder how you are, because all of the characters are complicated. Like, we get to know these people, and again, I think it's through your shining ability to write such great dialogue, and
Thank
so we
you.
get so much of them in such an efficient way so quickly. There was even like just a little thing, I'm trying to remember right now, between Lola, where she mentions that her best friend drags her across the street jaywalking. And it's just like, it's such a simple thing, but you just I was like, I've just learned something more about this person. So
right.
efficient, so
But
efficient.
she felt like she was like a perp that like hadn't been handcuffed, but was like following her. Like
That's right. And I love that. And so when you're writing characters, I mean, I don't know if you treat this, I think about like how people treat television scripts where they're creating almost Bibles beforehand.
That's really interesting because I've actually always found that difficult to do when I've been in a position to do it.
Yeah.
Because I find it difficult in the sort of Hollywood TV world to get sort of within an inch of writing dialogue. You can see it from your house. You know what I mean? You can really get to it, but no one has approved you yet. So you're doing like this like beat by beat like suggestion of what a scene would look like, and I'm like, it's
a lot.
Put me in, coach. Do that, like that feeling. and I feel like I don't have that with a novel, where this is where it gets a little sort of earnest and a little less self-deprecating, where you do actually let the characters develop for themselves as you write. You do see the dynamic, and they are shaped by each other genuinely. So it's a little less these like parallel, this is the kind of person who does this is the kind of person who does that. You actually get to see as you write how someone would respond to certain situations, to certain circumstances, to dialogue, to pressure from other people. And then you go back and you can see what's wrong a little bit, where like at first, you've got the sort of very glamorous, fast talking best friend, right? Who is the opposite of Lola, and the fact that she is not looking for love in any way, shape, or form. But they love each other. And after a while, if you're just doing like the quippy dialogue between them, it's like, well, what do they even see in each other as friends? And what are these people? So you kind of have to have these moments of sort of vulnerability or fallibility between them, and then they shape each other as you write. And so it is actually a much more organic process than laying out a character's motivations.
And the character that and also big character in the book is New York City. I feel like this has to take place in New York City.
I just said that like the salsa ad. New York City.
Because the idea, New York as a huge city is also a very small village, and the idea that
there's one neighborhood. This is Chinatown, the Lower East Side specifically. Yeah.
And although we find out later why this is, because it is actually predetermined. But the fact that our Lola runs into so many exes within 5 blocks, living in New York, that is plausible.
Oh yeah, very much. And that's also what's so funny is when people are like, "Oh, it's a pre-pandemic book." I'm like, "Yeah, because you're right. The whole book is based on running into other people and recognizing them." So.
Let me tell you, I relished in that perspective of New York.
Yeah, I'm glad because it's just I wonder if there was a little almost like pre-sadness or pre-love for even though I did not know COVID was coming, and I'm not an oracle, but like
no
No, I should say that. No, seriously. I feel like for the same reason when people ask me about like relationships now quite a bit in interviews, I feel like I want, about like, oh, do you think, a lot of the
Oh,
book is, does she believe in closure? I'll get back to the New York City question, but does she believe in closure? Does she, do we think that closure exists? How do we, where do we put the past? What's, healthy behavior and what's not? And I'm like, I am not Esther Perel. I don't know. You
you're
should
not going to
not
plug
take
your relationship podcast?
romantic advice from a novelist. Are you crazy? Like, but yeah, the New York part of it, again, I think what's funny is this sounds almost as nutty as saying I don't think it's necessarily speculative fiction. It sounds crazier, actually, probably, to say that I don't necessarily think it's a book about New York. It is clearly so firmly set in New York, but I think what makes it hopefully a success in that is that it's not meant to be a tribute. It's
No.
not meant to be. This is just where I live. And this is, I think it's another piece of that sort of operating in the negative, like sick of avoiding something. Like, I think that, to write what is essentially, it's literary, but like a romantic comedy mystery that takes place in Manhattan in today's day and age, I will never say whether or not I did it successfully because I don't know. But I do think it took a bit of balls to go ahead and tackle such cliche subjects and try to find my sort of own way into them,
Yeah, well, that is one of I think the great successes of this book is that
I hope. I know. I just know what I
completely
tried to do.
yeah, if you feel like you can't say it, I'll say it for you.
No, I guess I feel like I look at it and yeah, it is a lot about, I guess also in New York that is a little less, it's warm, right? It's like the sort of unknown elements of New York in the book, the things that pop out of you, like, Jack in the Box, are not, crazy people. No one is stabbing you. No one is yelling at you. Those are the boyfriends. And so I feel like I could let then the city be a sort of warmer, more interesting place where she just gets to know Chinatown and the Lower East Side in this adoring way.
But I also believe it's the only place she could be with these people who have had these kind of jobs and these kind of experiences.
They do generally have interesting jobs. And that is actually a very good point too, because
media jobs.
Be there. Well, it's a logistical thing. I mean, I imagine this novel, if I was Japanese, could be set in Tokyo, but Tokyo is so freaking big that I don't know. But like, or Paris. You need a walking city with a bunch of different industries that people gravitate towards and stay.
That's right.
So I guess I've not really been thinking in those qualifying terms, but if I was, New York would really be the number one. And then I guess Paris, Tokyo, that's too big. Mexico City, too big. Austin, you could do it in Austin.
We're talking about some global rights right now, everybody. So, so now, some people joining us may have had a chance to read the book. Some people joining us have never read the book, but there is a large.
Okay, it just came out.
Yeah, there's a large theme of course, as you mentioned, like our main character Lola, which is examining, where she is based on she's in a unhappy courtship with a fiance. She's unsure about whether this should turn into a marriage or not, and she is looking at her prior relationships, how they impacted her, and trying to achieve closure. And then there's basically, she's somehow inadvertently, that's kind of a good payoff, so whatever, inadvertently part of it's called Cult Classics, so let's just say a cult that is going to aid her in perhaps achieving closure.
Yes, that's their big thing. Almost there's a Dickensian sort of aspect of it, right? You'll be visited by three ghosts, that's a little more than three. But yeah.
But I will, so knowing that you wrote this book before the pandemic, and not like the wellness culture wasn't already thriving, but I think through the pandemic and because of the pandemic, it is at an all-time high. I mean, people have motivational messages in their kitchen on the walls.
Oh, well, you can see them now. I think they were always there. It's just that you can see, you know,
Right
the
now that
bubble
we're
in the Abbey
zooming in.
Hall. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And so there is a satirical element towards the wellness industry. Like you said, it's like, it's not pot shots because you have a way of talking about it through a different filter.
Yeah.
But is that something that, you know, because obviously it's a huge part of it. Were you thinking like, I want to figure out a way in to talk about this? It's always been of interest of yours, perhaps?
No, I think I was actually more, it's just, it's pretty low hanging fruit. You know, adaptogen powders, you know, this place that has been gutted, you know, I don't think these are tiny details. They're not going to ruin the book or anything like that, but there's like a crystallarium in it
Yes.
where, you know, they've turned basically what used to be essentially a rabbi's office into a big room with an amethyst geode where you're just supposed to feel vibes. You know, I mean, that kind of stuff where there's like a line at some point where someone says, you know, why should we have to leave Burning Man in the desert? And someone else is like, because of the sand. I don't know, like just spitballing here, you know, and I feel like that stuff is easy. And so it seemed, you know, the cult and cult classic comes from several different places. You know, that it's sort of triple duty. There's a very specific reason why it's in the book that I can't say. It's just funny to call a book cult classic. And then there's the sort of, you know, cultishness of it. But I would say for that last element that those who are interested in the Nexium documentary should buy a different book.
Right.
It's also a very serious issue, you know, like the idea of being deprogrammed and stuff like that, but it's actually not funny. But so what I did is I really wanted a kind of realistic as possible modern day cult and wellness, our obsession with the idea that if we just tweak ourselves ever so slightly, or just take this one exercise class all the time, we will achieve something higher and have some sort of shortcut to longevity or salvation or personal growth. These are cult-like terms. And like no one is being you know, it's ethical persuasion versus unethical persuasion, you know, but there are certain elements where like this man takes it to a crazy degree. People are working for him for free. Like there may or may not be some monochromatic pajamas in this book. You know, there's a lot of things that they're doing. And allegedly they have this higher purpose both for themselves and for Lola, which is that she is sort of their guinea pig to see if all of their various machinations will work and help her get over her life. But it's like, that's the kind of cultishness that I'm exposed to. So what I essentially did is take like goop and just like turn the dial up until it broke. You know, do you know what I mean? Like just like, and so the wellness thing is more, I think, the current most casual way we talk about cults. I'm not talking about like Wild Wild Country, or is it just One Wild? You know that documentary?
Yeah.
Wild It's funny, we don't have to get it right because I'm not talking about but you know what I mean? There's like that like and I think that their sort of leader, Clive, is really abusing the ubiquity of wellness culture. Oh, someone wrote Wild Country.
Yeah, there you go.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
but like,
thank you.
He's really abusing the fact that we have already swallowed this stuff. We've already digested it. And so what better pathway is there except for technology, which is the other pathway? Like I'm trying to think of something else that we have just accepted so much into our lives, you know, that if you look around, like, I don't know what's in these kitchen cabinets, but I'm sure there's like a lot of, you know, different herbs and a lot of
elixir, a vitamin,
and
right, a
smoothie,
smoothie,
you know, a little shot of something, and then obviously this is here, you know what I mean? So you're like, it's like, I don't know what else the pills we've already swallowed, you know, it's like long time no white noise, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think there was such an interesting element, and from a smart angle too, and low hanging fruit. But, you know, even so, I can't stop noticing that astrology is big again. And it's not just astrology, it's people talking about their compatibility based on astrology.
It's also the other human thing it's very funny. And, you know, Clive's girlfriend in the book, Chantal, is like a sort of wellness Instagram influencer type of creature, and I feel like she's also was a lot of fun to write, but I think part of what makes her fun to write, and there's another character at some point, you can tell that a woman named Body, who's the best friend character to Lola, is sort of threatened by Chantal about her follower count, about how, you know, sort of advanced she is in all these categories. And so the other thing that I find sort of amazing that keeps the world ticking, especially the wellness world, is the competition. You know, who is the most pure of adaptogen powders? Who is the best yoga poses, the best,
the glowiest skin. Who has the glowiest skin?
the glowiest skin, but so beyond that, it's like, oh, ayahuasca, really? Have you tried like iboga or iboga or whatever it is? Like, keep going until you hit dust. I don't know. And I feel like that desire to be closer to this elevated plane of wellness is right for a cult to swoop in and say, I can get you there faster.
Yeah. I'm the most well.
I am the most
Who
well.
is the most well of them all? All right. I want to bring on Jacques, who probably has some audience questions for us for our last time together. Hi, Jacques.
Hi. I wanted to make sure I'm back for.
Hi, welcome back.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to put this on gallery view so I can see everyone. And we have a lot of questions, but I'm going to start with one that Hannah asked of Sloane. Is the typo you're talking about where it says oat milk instead of oat milk, or is oat milk the latest milk alternative and I'm missing out?
Oh, I'm so happy and yet in such pain. That is the typo.
Oh.
I mean, we're talking about a 300-page book. Who asked this question? What genius?
That
Hannah
is amazing.
Staples.
Amazing. Yes. Oh, it causes me such pain. Yes. There's no, it kind of works, but it's oat milk, not oat milk. Don't make milk out of bark. That's the lesson.
Got it. All right. Sam has a few questions. We're going to start with his first, or I don't mean to misgender. Sam could be a she. Their question is there a secret literary social scene in New York where all you cool authors get together and talk shop? I hope / imagine there is.
Oh, man. Like, we're missing a ringleader for that. We need like a Gertrude Stein or like a, you know, an Algonquin round table for that. I do think that, you know, there are a couple of bars actually in the area where the book is set, where people sort of generally drift in and out of. It used to be Cafe Loop, which is a great bar, great restaurant that closed. When I say great restaurant, like it had a huge mouse problem and all the food was inedible. But they made a really good martini. And then clandestino maybe a little bit, but I don't think the problem is with New York in general is like the second you try to sort of harpoon that trend whale, if you will, it escapes you. So like I don't know if there's a specific scene. I do think I always pride myself on having a really good mix of people to read my work, people whose work I read, and people who work in graphic design and or doctors. I think that's very healthy. I think in fact that the scene, if you will, can become so not healthy. Like anything, like any group of friends. If you live in a small town, you know, that it's helpful to sort of break out of it and make sure you have friends who are not writers.
Right. And actually, since you mentioned graphic design, what is your involvement in the creation at all? It's such a wonderful look, and obviously it's such a vintage look. So
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. I was worried at first because there are mystery elements to the book, you know, but I hope there are mystery elements to every novel you ever read where you don't know exactly where it's going. I worried it looked a little Dashiell Hammett-y at first, but then I got over that in about 2 minutes. But yeah, when it you know, they showed me the cover process can be difficult for all authors. They showed me 2 covers. One was good, but not this one. And then I scrolled down and I think I even leaned into my computer in this very kitchen and was like, there you are. Like I just instantly fell in love with it. It's a woman named June Park who works for FSG and is fantastic. So I don't really have anything else to say except for the fact that like, if this book bombs, it's not because of the cover. It's really good.
It's a huge part of
it's so great.
the book. So
I think she really nailed also tonally there's humor to it. It's stylish. It's everything that I do hope that the book lives up to the cover. I really, and that's a rare thought for an author to have about their cover. Huge fan. Yeah.
Now, Sam's next question is actually aimed at both of you, and I will
Okay.
give Ophira the first chance to answer it. She's looking scared. If you had your own little free library, would you stock it with your own books? Or what would you stock it with? And what would the theme or name of your little free library be?
Aw.
They all have their own characteristics.
I love that. How nice. Let me think about that, because there's a free library little house down the block from me, and I always look in it, and I feel like it goes through trends where I'm like, oh, someone got rid of all their travel books. Like, you can tell that people
Someone does not want to learn Czech anymore.
just like, oh, someone's kid's a teenager, like a certain amount of books. But I gotta say, as someone, as I read according to what I need to read, and that was another reason why I really liked this at this exact time in my life, because I love mystery.
Okay.
And so the theme of my little, which I think it is perfect for a little house to be a little mystery, but I like detective novels, I like mystery, I like thrillers where no children get hurt.
Yeah.
It's got to be seriously. So I guess my theme of my little library would be mystery, but children do not get hurt.
That is a big one.
It's hard. A lot of children get hurt in mystery.
Children are animals stuff.
So your little free library would be called like Safe Yet Bleak House or something like that.
Yeah,
I love
that.
Safe Bleak House.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Mine, I think, because of the nature of the building. Well, first of all, I think I'm just gonna what is it? That neither of us would put our own books.
No. You got to buy that.
Yeah, mostly for royalty purposes. But no, neither of us would put our books. But I think because it's a little library, I like the idea of there being short stories in there. I love short story collections. Lori Moore, Jim Shepard, Michael Cunningham, Alice Elliott Dark. I would do all those have in common are American writers from the 80s. There's a weird sort of lost decade where, we're all quite familiar with Cheever. We like digging up Lucia Berlin. But like, there's just a weird, that's a sort of, beyond Raymond Carver. But I don't think I would be called beyond. I think actually, now that I'm talking, I think I would be, it's like a free library. It would be called Take It or Leaf It. Is that funny? Is that like a leaf of a book?
I like it.
Okay.
I like it.
I don't know. I feel like if you have to if you have to explain the joke, like if you can say Heimlich, you don't need it. But yeah, so I think it would be short stories that really I sort of first fell in love with in college. That kind of thing.
That's
all right. Question from Joanna Solomon. And this is for Sloane. Do any of your essays stick out as particularly memorable to you, like one you're especially proud of for its reception, or it delighted you regardless of its reception, or one that feels the most intimate?
Yeah, I always wish, because I have 3 books of essays, and I always wish there was some sort of this would not be good for royalties, but some sort of a mechanism by which I could make a mixtape. I'm like, I don't know how to do this, just to get to Frankenstein them up. The last essay, the closest precursor, to a cult classic really is the last essay in my second book, How Did You Get This Number? Which of the 3 might be the least popular collection, but I really am proud of that essay. And there are others I'm proud of, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because I remember I handed in the book and I said to my editor, I know that there's not enough material here. I'm missing an essay. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I can filibuster, write about ice cream, or you can tell me what's missing. And he said, you never write about your love life. And I sort of bristled and I was like, well, I don't do it. And then I went home and spat out this 13,000 word baby about that's half about stolen furniture and half about seeing a man who had a girlfriend that I didn't know about. and I'm really proud of it. It's called Off the Back of a Truck, and I don't know if it's the one I'm the most proud of, but I think about it a lot these days because of this novel.
Oh, cool. I'm going to jump around a little bit here. So we have a question.
These are great questions.
I'm going to throw this one at all three of us. Weird question, but what is your favorite cult from history?
Ah,
Huh. Good one. Good one. Good one. I'm not sure I have a favorite.
To me, I have spent the most time learning about Scientology, and I'm a playwright. I will always try to fit Scientology into a play. Whenever I'm in a city that has a Scientology center, I will go in, and I'm obsessed with Scientology.
you can have brunch at they have a free brunch at the Scientology Center in LA.
I've done it.
Ah!
Okay, I'm not going to say this was one of my proudest moments, but as a just right out of college, university, as we call it in Canada, me and a friend were living in Vancouver with nothing to do. And there's a huge Scientology place there. And we decided we would go to take the test, which is, by the way, 600 questions.
Oh my gosh.
Very long.
Enneagram. Yeah.
And we brought 3 props each that we decided that we had to like we were treating like an improv class.
Yeah.
Like you have to, we were just like dumb out of college and demanded to meet Tom Cruise.
At what stage where you're like, listen, we're 300 questions in. We've at least like a meet and greet, just press the flesh. You know what I mean? Like it's just like something.
Yeah, we're like, how do we can we just meet Tom Cruise? You know, I was on the receiving end of this. I know this is part of there's one major one that did this, but anyways, it was like a wellness thing to release yourself from your past, honestly. And part of that was they would have phones set up. I think this is pre-cell phone, where they would encourage people there to pick up the phone and call someone who they have an unreconciled issue with from the past.
Was Dionne Warwick running this school?
And I got one of these calls.
Oh, wow.
I was that person. I was unreconciled. And, much like it goes, there is the person that feels that they are unreconciled with you. And then there's the other person that is not the star of that story that goes, what happened?
Of course. Right?
Which that is part of, there's a couple lines actually in your book where you kind of explore that, like who is the star of their story and how does it impact them?
Well, there's a part where she apologizes to a guy. Not all people have wounded her, I mean, she apologizes to an old boyfriend for treating him like crap and being really condescending to him and sort of wanting him to change and trying to be passive aggressive about it. And she is forthright about it years later. And she says, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, don't worry. I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, no, I was a dick to you. And he says, you were just being yourself. Because I wanted her to have a little bit of comeuppance here and there, but I feel like for me, the favorite, it's hard I don't mean it to be a downer, but it's hard because they do so much damage. I'm not the Shinrika Tokyo gas bombings, love those. Jonestown, awesome. But I'm trying to think of a relatively harmless one that I found while researching this book, actually, is from I think late 60s, early 70s, the Silva mind control method, where it's just a lot of guidebooks and charts about how to think and how to be. And it's just it has a sort of religious structure to it, which makes it essentially a cult, and there's just a figurehead and a religious structure to it, and you have to have faith in it. And that was just, that's reading 70s pamphlet literature about aligning your chi, nobody gets blown up at the end. So it's nice.
Got it. We're running a little over time, but if that's okay with both of you, we could do a few more questions.
Sure. I mean,
yeah, great.
Right.
I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. All right.
We're here. This is another one from Joanna, the very popular Joanna Solomon. What inspired the names of the characters in cult classic? They're all unusual and appear meaningful.
Oh my gosh, I love that question. Because I started to say actually before that that it's a thing that's come up. So what's funny about it is they don't seem Lola is Lola because of that name's presence in pop culture and in lyrics, where people sort of singing songs to her, or that like maybe a little bit, that this is the one aspect in which she might have like a very direct correlation to me, is that sometimes when I hear people on the street say slow down, I think that I turn because I don't hear my name that much. So like hola, like slow down, like she always turns for that. But she needed to be sort of an every woman. And there was something about Lola that felt like distinct, like her name isn't, Rachel or Sarah or, Christine, but it felt distinct and yet familiar. And I like the sound of it. Vadi is not even really my friend's name is Vadis, but I pronounce it Vadi, not to her face, but in the book. She just needed to have a sort of creative name. And then I think, I won't go through all of them, but like, I think a lot of it comes from that some of the men that don't appear that much have interesting names because they needed to stick out and then pass through the book. So a short story that's like only a few pages about someone, named Kevin, who doesn't have that many defining characteristics. It's almost like, why is he there? It helps sort of throw them into a little bit of relief for the men. Mm-hmm. And then the one that seems to me not weird at all, because he's sort of weirdly the one character that I miss in this really messed up way. You'd think it would be my heroine, but it's Clive. His name is Clive Glenn. And I feel like that's a real person in a weird way in my mind. So it doesn't seem like a weird name at all.
Got it. Another question for Sloane from Greer Hill. Is there a particular ex you wish you could run into, and what would you say to them? Much love for this book from a fellow Con College alum.
Oh, yes. Hello. Go Camels. Weirdest mascot of its generation. Or many of them. Oh, man. Is there a particular ex? No. I don't think so. No. I feel like I've seen them. I know them, I don't want to run into them, or I'm friends with them, or there's just a lot of like, I don't particularly care. No, yeah, because I think also with social media, I really know what so many of them are up to. And so I don't really feel the need to scratch that itch. It's more actually like there are friends, again, not to sort of like hammer home the friends we made along the way thing, but like there are friends I lost touch with that I would love to see, that I would love to run into for good or bad reasons, but no men. Sorry guys.
All right, and last question, since we're over time here, is can you, this is from Hannah Staples, can you tell us anything about your upcoming nonfiction book?
Okay, yeah, I'll do it again. Since we're out of time, I won't give you the whole pitch for it. But I keep describing these two books, that are coming out fairly close to each other. I mean, we'll see, hopefully the end of next year, as like the happy child and the sad child. This is the happy child we're dealing with. The sad one is a book about grief that will generally follow the sort of 5 stages of grief, even though those have been debunked, they go back and forth, that are about a series of very unfortunate events that took place at the end of 2019. I was burglarized, sort of stalked, and then my dearest friend died by suicide. And so then the pandemic hit, which you're familiar with that one. So it's sort of about walking through these different losses in a way that I hopefully is actually a little bit funny, but when I was reading, I'm not someone who could really be confused with sort of like identifying a marketplace, but I was reading a lot of either things were self-help or like Kay Jamison and Joan Didion. And so I just think that, it's just hopefully a different angle on grief.
And so that comes out next year, and we'll have you back, hopefully.
I would, yes, please, at the Mark Twain house for sad things. Nice to say goodbye. Bye.
Goodbye. Well, before we bobble off into the evening,
Oh,
I want
wow.
to thank you both for
Thank
joining us,
you.
and having us
Thank
back. And for those who were watching and maybe tuned in late, we will be posting this talk on our YouTube channel. So we're busy loading up a ton of different programs that we've done over the past 2 years, but this will be one of them. So be sure to visit our website to see that. That's all the housekeeping I have. And actually, I should remind everyone, of course, for your own use and to put in your local little free library, please click on the link to purchase your signed copy of Cult Classic. And buy one for your little free library as well. All right. Well, thank you both. Thank you everyone for your great questions and for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye-bye.